If you're going to say that corporate media's coverage of political campaigns is awash in homogenous punditry and dull conventional wisdom, you'll get no argument from us. But to say that's the fault of the internet, and that not too long ago campaign coverage was very different, well, that doesn't make any sense. But that's exactly the case Washington Post political columnist Dana Milbank tried to make in his October 24th column. And what's making campaign journalism so bland? To Milbank, social media outlets like Twitter are to blame. Reporters have one eye on the debates and the other eye on Twitter chatter, which he says means the conventional wisdom is set almost in real time. And he sees this as a big change. Quote, not too long ago, the wire services, broadcast networks, and newspapers covered major political events differently. Each outlet had its own take and tidbits. But now everybody is operating off the same script, and except for a few ideological outliers, the product is homogeneous, close quote. Maybe he reads a different media than we do, but the most obvious aspect of big media's political coverage is how homogeneous it's always been. The same pundits circulating on the Sunday chat shows, the same political consultants and talking heads, the same obsessions with gaffes, polls, and so on. You can't blame any of that on the internet. If anything, the internet has made many new voices available. People who are cut out of elite media can speak up, agitate, and fact-check. Reporters who aren't incorporating these voices into their journalism are making a choice. Blaming the internet for dull campaign coverage doesn't make any sense, but it does suggest that some reporters are looking to blame someone else for the obvious problems with their work.
And speaking of efforts to cast blame, you might remember a couple of weeks ago we told you that we the people, according to Time magazine, are the reason that political candidates tell lies. We don't demand that they do otherwise, or at least we don't do it effectively. Now the New York Times explains that we're also the reason that candidates don't talk about real issues. In an October 21st analysis, the Times' Scott Shane asks the reader this, quote, imagine a presidential candidate who spoke with blunt honesty about American problems, dwelling on measures by which the United States lags its economic peers, close quote. Such a candidate who might vow to fix child poverty, educational failures, and infant mortality would get nowhere fast, says Shane, not because journalists like himself have rarely shown those issues the sustained or fervid interest they devote to, say, the federal deficit. No, it's because people, regular Americans, quote, demand constant reassurance that their country, their achievements, and their values are extraordinary, close quote. Candidates and presidents, Shane says, generally oblige them. This is psychological projection of a pretty high order. It's for people, the Times tells us, the ones suffering with the child poverty, educational failure, and infant mortality, that, quote, it is impermissible to dwell on chronic, painful problems or on statistics that challenge the notion that the United States leads the world, close quote. It isn't pundits that, quote, ensure that many major issues are barely discussed, close quote. It's that people have an aversion to bad news. I guess that's a handy excuse for journalistic temerity and laziness. And if that doesn't work, maybe you can go back to blaming Twitter.
Turn to the October 17th edition of USA Today and you see this headline in the money section, Another Blow for Green Energy. What's the story? A company that makes batteries for electric cars has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That in itself is not really big news, but the real lesson here is about the media, which so often finds these stories important because they send a political message. The company in question, you see, got stimulus money, and so its failure is a big issue for the Mitt Romney campaign. Indeed, the USA Today article reads almost like a Romney press release, with a few quotes from the candidate and one from his campaign spokesperson. It's hard not to conclude that these companies fail all the time. Romney, in fact, said earlier this year that half of the companies receiving green energy loan guarantees had gone out of business. That is not true. In fact, the failure rate of green companies getting stimulus money is pretty low, about 1% as measured by the amount of government money invested, according to Time reporter Michael Grunwald. But the failures, like Solyndra, are remarkably visible. And that's because Republican politicians like to talk about them, and because reporters give them a lot of attention. That surplus visibility means people are likely to get the impression that these companies are failures, and that the public investment in them is a big waste.
An Obama campaign ad in Ohio faults Mitt Romney for having a Swiss bank account, wanting to maintain tax breaks for corporations that offshore jobs, and for once railing against deadly pollution from a coal plant. The ad dubs Romney, "not one of us." Racist, right? Well, that's how it struck Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post, who wrote that the language, quote, echoes a slogan that has been used as a racial code over at least the past half-century, close quote. She cites a right-wing critic at the National Review's Corner blog, because that's where one goes for deep critiques of racism, and another right-wing critic on the Hot Air blog, who argued there was a double standard, that a similar Romney ad would have brought charges of bigotry. Tumulty pushed the theme further by recalling racist political ads from the past that ran taglines she says were similar. It's all nonsense, of course. As is clear, the ad isn't about race at all, as an Obama spokesperson tells Tumulty. It's about the auto bailout and other economic issues. In fact, most revealingly, the commercial closes with an image of Romney saying in 2003 that a coal plant kills people. So the ad's message is that Romney is not one of us because he supports economic policies that are hostile to us. That Romney, once a fierce critic of a polluting industry, is not as friendly to the coal industry, a large employer in Ohio, as he now says he is. The odd politics of such an appeal would be a far more interesting topic than empty right-wing posturing.